the Cannabis Business Coach.
Hi, Mike Z here, author of the Cannabis Business Book, and you're listening to the Cannabis Business Coach podcast, where I chat with and coach the highest performing entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry.
Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. The Cannabis Business Coach.
Hi, Mike Z here, and on today's episode of the Cannabis Business Coach podcast, I'm joined by Justin Johnson, the CEO and founder of BudsFeed. And Justin, I'm thrilled to have you on here. I think BuzzFeed is a super cool platform. And before we get into all that and some of the other cool things that you work on, I was hoping that you could introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little more about you and your many adventures in the cannabis world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my name's Justin Johnson. Grew up West Coast primarily. So I've been out here in New York for about 9 years, but spent most of my life in Seattle and Los Angeles. Went to college out there and started my career in advertising on the West Coast. Spent about 13 years of my life in advertising in particular, and probably about the last 2 or 3 years of that particular career or lifetime in the consumer tech space. Being from Washington State, living in California, I'd say that cannabis has always kind of been a part of my life. Culturally, working in advertising, it was always something that was very acceptable. So I felt, pretty fortunate. I kind of got to be in college for my adult career, and so when I made the decision to really enter the cannabis industry, I think it made a lot of sense, both from as a person with a lot of consumer experience, but also coming from a creative field where I wasn't crossing a chasm that like I felt like I would be disowned by half of my relatives or coworkers. So most of my life in the advertising field though before starting BuzzFeed.
Gotcha. And how or why did you decide to enter the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I think one thing that I noticed when I was running business development for a social content studio was, I was working with Frito-Lay and US Bank and Purina and some of the biggest consumer brands in the world who are, spending millions of dollars on advertising, both the content and the media. I felt like consumer acceptance, in addition, just the legalization train that we were starting to see march, starting about 10 years ago as these states kind of started to fall. I felt like the cannabis industry was kind of going into that direction. I had a lot of knowledge about it from just being a personal consumer and hanging out with people in the space. And, for me, I felt like it was a good opportunity because while I was working with these brands who had the ability to advertise on these platforms, or even, they can't really even post it without, the possibility of being shut down. I felt like there was an opportunity to build a place that added value to those entrepreneurs in particular, gave them a place to share their products, get exposure for their products, and network with their customers. It's kind of I saw a limitation in social media, and frankly, even publishing. I felt like a lot of the publishing was very niche towards the lifestyle, and there wasn't any kind of bigger platformification of the industry happening.
And so when did you actually go all in on cannabis and start BuzzFeed and get involved as an entrepreneur in the industry?
Yeah, so I would say it was probably around 2016 that I had the initial idea for BuzzFeed. And like any great idea, you go and you buy every domain possible. And I was thrilled that I got the domain. So I had this concept. I was working at the agency. I was really looking to pursue. I'd probably invested a couple $1,000 in just building like an MVP of what a publisher might look like, writing some stories. And then Jeff Sessions became our attorney general. And I was like, is this the time? Should I do this now? And mind you, this is before I really got plugged into the community in New York and really knew people in the circles that you've been walking around with, for, a better half of the last decade. And so, I kind of put it on pause. I was working at a startup and working on it in the background. And frankly, one day I got a call from someone who I'd managed for several years, and her father had retired and was starting to invest in cannabis. And honestly asked me to advise him on a couple investments just to see if I felt like they were going in the right direction in terms of, processing licenses. And, there's a million things that he asked me about these investments. And, after those things kind of went through, he had a good experience with me, asked me about my idea and if I would be happy to propose a business plan to him. And obviously I took advantage of that opportunity and shared it with him. So that was probably mid 2018. By late 2018, I closed, an initial round of funding, quit my job and started building the idea. And so I was pretty fortunate in that regard that, I'm a lifelong servant. When you think about when you do work for a salary, it's consistent. It comes with medical benefits. It's something that I, was always comfortable with. So I was pretty blessed to have the opportunity to kind of not worry about that and kind of pursue just building this thing for the last, couple of years now. Yeah, that's how it happened, man. It's, be good to people and things come back around. If I didn't have a good relationship with this person that I had managed 5 years ago and built a really trusting relationship, I don't, probably wouldn't have trusted me to have that relationship with her father. And so.
Right. I love that story. It reminds me of the saying, fortune favors the prepared. And
right.
you had something that you were working on, and it almost developed, pardon the pun, organically, where someone reached out to you and, hey, I have some cannabis questions for you. Can you help me out? And then, one thing led to another, and eventually, this project that you were working on became, this next investment for this person. I'm curious, why did they reach out to you with these cannabis questions? I'm guessing you maybe had a reputation as being knowledgeable about cannabis related issues or enthusiastic about cannabis or something like that. Can you give me some color there?
Well, I was always very open about consumption, and I was allowed to kind of where I worked, fortunately, and it wasn't frowned upon or anything like that. So I was fortunate to work in a great work environment. But when I left the agency, I left with the intention of building BudsFeed, and people knew that I had this knowledge. People knew that I had been really investing myself into researching it. Honestly, starting to meet more people in the New York community that are behind the advocacy groups. Like, for instance, this is like one of the best things that happened kind of in general with BuzzFeed was I used to manage a guy named Jeremy and a woman named Melissa, and they happened to be roommates with Ryan Lepore, who's the deputy director of NYC Normal. So when I left to do this thing, and I kind of announced it to my company because I was a partner in my company and I was leaving to do this basically, and Jeremy connected me with Ryan when I started it, and it just so happened that the young woman I'm talking about, she remembers when I left to do this, and when it came up in a personal conversation, she just thought of me. Obviously, I think there's probably traditional consultants, especially at the time, because I didn't have a tenth of the knowledge that I do now. But it's relationships, man. That's all consulting too. I think the situation that I explained is how I got the investment. In the climate we're marching into right now, I don't know how. It's not like it's still a very fortunate thing to happen, but I don't think it's going to be uncommon. I think that there's going to be a lot of money available for people in the cannabis industry especially with different ideas that have been executed already, and even still, there's going to be a lot of money available for processing facilities, like things that people know are going to generate cash. Like we're getting to that stage now where this is looking like the only bipartisan issue in America, and one of the most investable things since like we started mining gold. So
Absolutely. I love that story. Shout out to Ryan Lepore. Great guy, great advocate. And I'm happy to say that he's a staple of the New York community, a leader in the New York community, and does great work. So that's awesome that you guys got connected and that kind of got the ball rolling. I want to take a step back because I heard you say a couple of things I want to highlight. One is that you left a company that you were a partner in to go and pursue a cannabis startup. And I want to highlight that because I think something that is often overlooked, especially by less experienced entrepreneurs and folks that want to get into cannabis, is that you're going to have to sacrifice to get into this space. You're going to have to pay some cost, whether it's the time, the money, or the security of a stable job. You have to be willing to give something up in order to come into the cannabis space and build something. And
right.
So that requires a certain amount of conviction, a certain amount of courage, and a certain amount of financial stability to be able to do that. So I just want to encourage anyone and everyone who's listening, to be mindful of that before you dive in, so to speak. The other thing I heard you say that I wanted to highlight was that as you were making that transition, you were doing research, you were investing in getting prepared, which I think is another thing that people unfortunately too often skip, is doing the homework and doing the research and actually getting to understand what it is they're getting into before trying to get into legal cannabis. So can you speak a little to how you were getting prepared and how you were planning and what that process looked like for you?
Yeah, totally. It's funny. I think people walk into the industry and they think like and to some degree I did too. Like I got a great name, got a strong background. I used to make music videos. I worked with MX. Like I'll be able to come in here and knock it out of the park. Nobody around here cares about that. How long have you been in this game? How many times have you gone and advocated for legalization in New York? That's what a lot of people, at least in the community that you're setting this company up in New York, that's what the people around here care about. So again, very fortunate to meet Ryan. I think Ryan, got me involved early on. He connected me with the guys at Comeback Daily and hanging out with them and just learning about what they're doing with CBD on their end, hanging out there, meeting some of those folks, understanding what's important to them as a business, meeting other people that come in and hang out there and seeing what they're doing as a business, because there's a lot of businesses already in New York that I didn't even know about. So part of it was really just hanging out with people who were in this, and Ryan happens to also work at Presto Doctor, so he's in the scene like all the time professionally. Pretty lucky scenario for him. But finding people that would come in and they were an accountant. They'd come in, they had their little cannabis thing on the side, and maybe they were meeting there and connecting with other people. So that in particular, and then the advocacy stuff. So, Ryan turned me on to the stuff that Normal was doing. Obviously, the marijuana justice marches up in Albany. Through that connection, I also got connected with Grizzly Beaucourt and Kate Caridi at Canaware Society. So I started volunteering some time to help them, with some of their events and stuff like that. And just, you and I were kind of talking a little bit about, I grew up in Washington State, right? And so things like the social equity programs and those are all things that I really learned about in that period of time. Those are not things that I I understood the damage of the war on drugs, and I understood it at a macro. I watched a documentary level, but I didn't necessarily realize that my friends were impacted by it, or their uncle or their aunt, right? And that these are real people that it happened to in New York that I was dealing with now, because I grew up in Spokane, which was, the reason Washington was ignorant to a lot of this stuff is they didn't have some of the same problems that we had in New York. So really understanding what we were fighting for with legalization in New York, doing the advocacy stuff, and networking with people, and just, trying to add as much value as I can as somebody who comes from a marketing and business profession, just to add value to the conversation, because every person I've met in the scene has added some perspective or value to the journey.
Absolutely. And shout out to Grizzly and Comeback Daily. Love those guys. I miss hanging out at Comeback Daily. Boy, those were good times out there. And I'm going to make a quick shameless plug for my book, The Cannabis Business Book, in which I say advocacy and activism is mandatory if you want to be an entrepreneur in this space. And if you're new to the space or the community, it's one of the best ways to get educated and build your network and build some credibility. So, the fact that you are out there volunteering and, basically putting in time and effort for the cause, to me, that's like, one, if you're not willing to do that, you probably shouldn't be in this industry. And two, it's honestly, I think the best way to actually get ahead in this industry is to be a part of the movement first. So kudos to you for doing that, Justin. I want to shift gears now and actually talk about BudsFeed. So for the folks at home who may not be familiar with it, first of all, go to budsfeed.com and get involved, make it part of your cannabis rotation. But Justin, I'd love to hear from you. What is BudsFeed? Why does it matter? How should people engage with it? And, I will make the disclaimer that I know the answer to these questions, and I think the platform is great. I fully endorse it. I think it's fills a very needed gap in the marketplace. So kudos to you for actually being innovative and creating something new, which I feel like a lot of people just come into this space trying to copy and recreate the wheel, which, look, there's nothing wrong with following the blueprint, if you will, but to actually create something new and different and solve a problem, it's a lot more difficult. And in my judgment, you've done that. So kudos to you. Now tell the folks all about BudsFeed.
Yeah, so in its simplest form, BuzzFeed is a platform for sharing cannabis-related products and services. Anybody can sign up and seed a product on the platform, but I would say that my main focus is really brands and entrepreneurs. There's a lot of activity of people who love products that are sharing, seeding it on BuzzFeed, but really, the goal long term is, if you're an entrepreneur and you're coming out with a new cannabis related product or service, make it part of your launch plan, right? And there's a couple core benefits to that. One, you're going to start building backlinks to your site, which is valuable, as you start to do reputation management. Like you, for instance, with your book, we got to seed your book, have you seed your book on budsfeed.com, because, when it starts to come SEO time, you want to own the front page of your search results, and you want to control what you've seeded on BuzzFeed. So, when people click that get it link, they go buy your book. So it helps you build backlinks. You're obviously exposing yourself to a broader audience that is growing every single day. And then if you become one of the most upvoted products of the week and end up in our top 5, you kind of get celebrated, is what I say, in our top 5 seeds, which is, we have a little module at the top of the website for you where you stay at the top of the website for a whole nother week. We feature you in our email newsletter, and we feature you on our social media. So really, in my world, participation makes the world go round. And then, those who perform the best kind of get above average kind of expected exposure from the platform, and it's all free. And really, the main idea behind it is that there's so much innovation happening in the cannabis space, and there are, either people that are inventing these things, or there's, cool people that are discovering these things. And the only way to really bring all that stuff to the surface is by kind of crowdsourcing it, right? And allowing other people to bring that to you, because otherwise it's always like, everybody's message is always top down. If I'm selling a specific product, I'm only going to be talking to you about that product. So that was really the idea. And it was, trying to, I felt like the industry in general was hungry for opportunities to expose themselves as much as possible, get as much promotion out there as possible, and, basically create something that adds value to them. And then on the face value of it, if you're just a consumer, it's like window shopping for weed products, right? Like you can go there and you can spend, I think on average, our users spend 4 to 5 minutes per session on the site, because they're just sitting there scrolling through, unicorn rainbow paper, rolling papers, new books, a nail salon that lets you smoke weed in it. There's all sorts of different stuff. There's about 50 different categories. So on the outside, it really is becomes kind of a catalog that consumers can explore.
Yeah, I love it, and I'm gonna make another shameless plug, because and even though I kind of hate this, it's, when people are pitching stuff and it's like, it's the this of weed, or it's the this of, I feel like the inspiration for my book, which is available on Amazon.com, was it's the Think and Grow Rich of weed. And when I see BudsFeed, I think it's like a combination of, it's like Product Hunt meets Pinterest, but for weed, which I think is like a very potent hybrid, if you will. But would you say that's like a fair characterization of it?
It's totally fair. What's really funny is I'm a fanboy of now I'm forgetting his name all of a sudden from Product Hunt, Ryan Hoover. I think Ryan Hoover is a really, inspirational. He's kind of from my area where I grew up. I think what he built with Product Hunt is really cool, because it elevates those entrepreneurs and those indie developers that are developing really cool stuff. It might not be the next Google app, but it could be, the next Slack integration that makes a few $million or whatever. So Product Hunt was definitely an inspiration. And, the thing I realized, though, that was a little different between like a Product Hunt or a Reddit and the cannabis space, was that most of the people that were in the cannabis space were really into Instagram. And so what I really realized was it's more the visual part of it. So Product Hunt is more, thumbnails and very minimal descriptions, and very kind of more like a forum looking platform. And I noticed that when I made BudsFeed more card based and visual, the traffic stuck way harder, because I used to have it used to be a much simpler interface. And but yeah, I think that's a very fair description.
Nice. All right, so
I'm glad you know about Product Hunt too, because sometimes I bring that up with people, and because like when I talk to other people that have been in tech, a lot of them are down with it. They understand what it is too, and how powerful it is. And I certainly wanted to capture some of that magic with BuzzFeed, because it's an equally small category of people. Leafly just said what? We have 310, I can't remember the number, 325,000 people in this industry. You don't need to build the next Instagram or Facebook of weed. You need to create something that can really embrace that small but growing group of people,
Absolutely. Something that actually solves a problem, which I feel like, and a problem that enough people have that you could build a scalable business behind it. But, that's neither here nor there. Justin, I want to ask you, I know that you work on some other cool projects, and I wanted to ask you to speak a little about what else are you working on, and what are you most excited about of all the things that you work on?
Totally. Yeah. So the business model, honestly, with BuzzFeed, I try not to go the route of your traditional publisher. I just think even in the best of worlds that aren't cannabis related in publishing, it can be very difficult to make money that way and only that way. And so a lot of what I do is, consulting, usually when it relates to brand marketing and stuff like that. Brand marketing, digital strategy, those types of things that are kind of in my background. But one of the things that I've really started to lean into is as products come through the platform, oftentimes I'm meeting these entrepreneurs who are looking to take the next step themselves and identifying business opportunities that I can get involved on. So I'm currently consulting an amazing processing facility in Michigan. I'm working on another launch of a pretty interesting vaporizer technology right now. But the thing that I'm most interested in is the chill, which is the world's first stainless steel vacuum insulated smoking device, which is really an organic story that happened at BudsFeed. I mean, my partner in that company, Rich, was one of the first 100 subscribers to my newsletter before I ever built the website. He was referred to me by his sister, who I had worked with in the past on Walmart and Unilever in a crazy past world in our advertising life. And we really took this idea he had and the technology and the background that he had from his career, and we bootstrapped a real business that has gotten a wholesale deal now. We have inventory coming to the country, and it's getting a lot of interest now. So that's been super exciting to just have something that's literally came to you as a sketch on a little more than a sketch on a napkin, like a 3D diagram, and to see that really come to life and not only have it have the response that you thought it would, but more so. That's been exciting, because it's almost as exciting as building BudsFeed itself, because it literally is something from scratch. A lot of the companies I help, maybe they've gotten off over the first hump or two, and this was one where it was like, we actually went to the lawyer and created the formation documents together. So
nice. And
exciting. Yeah,
I see you have some of the products behind you. Would you bring one up and just show the folks?
Yeah, for sure. I don't have any of the full pieces in it right now, but so this is the chill. This is the classic stainless steel chill, food grade stainless steel, ceramic interior line, vacuum insulated, and completely compartmentalized. So if I wanted to, we have a lot of different designs here. This is I like to call this the Eames chill, but I can't probably legally say that. But what's interesting about all of them is, as you start to collect, if you want to mix and match your necks, you can start to create different designs. We'll have the different, pretty much any finish you can think of. And so the main technology behind it is, it's stainless steel. It's not going to break. It's really designed to keep your water at the desired temperature for up to 12 hours. So if you like steamy water, you can keep warm water warm too. And then the ceramic interior. And so the ceramic interior is another one of the patented features, along with the insulation, because we just know that there's people that have sensitivity to either metal taste or even the perception of hitting out of metal. So, the ability to, hit from something that cleans and feels like glass. There's no exposure to metal. And, obviously the compartmentalization is really going to drive, hopefully, the personalization and allow people to, maybe they do end up crushing a neck and they want a new one. That's one possible scenario, but really, like, some people have 10, 15 pieces in their house. Maybe they want to mix and match, the style of their chill. So yeah, man, it's been one of those things too. Like, we really were leaning, you can tell by most aspects of the product, we were really leaning into the vacuum insulation as that differentiator. But as we exposed it to more people, kind of these, 3 or 4 other things became really particularly apparent. A lot of people just love the fact that they're like, I'm not going to break that thing. So
That's
yeah,
right.
man.
And we'll have Rich on the show at a future date because he's also got a pretty unique background and an origin story into cannabis. And I I have the bong at home. I have 2 of them actually, and I was surprised because I used to really enjoy the warm water, and then
Yeah,
I hit this with the warm water, and I feel like the cold water is much better. So I don't know. That's just one data point here, but I really like the product. I think it's very high quality, and I'm excited. I don't know if this is public or not. If not, I can cut it out. Don't worry. But I'm excited for the modular glass piece, the glass
yeah,
neck with the perks and all that stuff. I think that's going to
yeah.
be really sweet.
I was just going to say that in particular, once we start building those adapters, and we really want to make that open source too. We want, one thing that's really important, again, understanding your community that you're going into. You don't want to alienate the glass community. The glass community is an underpinning of this entire thing, so we want to make that open source. We want to give people the ability to make necks and perks and all these different types of things for it, for sure.
Nice.
But we have a few of our own that are hopefully coming very soon. I don't have a date on them just yet, but we've been working on the adapters pretty hard.
Awesome. Justin, I want to ask you, what is the biggest challenge you've faced as a cannabis entrepreneur?
The biggest thing that I think most entrepreneurs really face is some level of loneliness, and just knowing that you're really doing a lot on your own and feeling that way, because your community can't, when you don't work for a company, you're used to working for a company that has 35 people, and then you don't, and you have there's people that support you, but they're not there like employees. That gets difficult. You have to do a lot of heavy lifting yourself. Sometimes you just can't get to everything on a daily basis, and that can sometimes feel like, I think, the end of the world, if enough serious things happen in one day. I would say that. And for me personally, one of the things that became hard was, I entered into a new community where I definitely had to learn a lot of new stuff to be perceived close to the level I was in my other professional life. But a lot of the tricks that I had from my other professional life aren't going to work in this industry, right? I've done over $50 million worth of Facebook advertising in my career. I can't do a drop of that in cannabis, right? Like, I've literally, probably invested, honestly, easily over $500 million in paid media in my advertising career to places that, that it just won't benefit the cannabis space. So you kind of have to rewrite it. Fortunately, my background is in social media, so a lot of that is like hacking the organic graph anyway and trying to figure out what you can get out of just building a following. But it's kind of what we're stuck with in this space. So yeah, feeling a little bit of that loneliness and knowing some of the things that maybe got me ahead previously aren't really in play in this industry, or things that I knew really well didn't hold nearly as much value in this industry.
Yeah, I hear that, and that's tricky for sure. And I'll share a fun fact that I've been banned from Facebook advertising for years now because I used to promote, events and articles, and I got banned without warning, without any notice or anything. And every time I go to appeal it, I get an error. Like, I submit the thing and it's just like error. And I'm like, okay, thanks, Facebook. Thanks for nothing.
I've snuck a few things through. Like, I do some of these like videos and some of these interviews with like entrepreneurs I could probably pull off. But like I did the hemp flax tractor, right? And I was able to get to promote that video one time just for because I was just trying to get some views. I was trying to get, people to understand, what BuzzFeed was. And so, but outside of that, I would keep getting denied. And frankly, my fear was getting blocked, because it was just like, it was reaching the point where the time exchange wasn't there. Like, even if I was able to advertise, it's like, oh my gosh, I spent 2 days trying to get this like hacked through Facebook. And then, a week from now, I could be completely banned. I burnt all that time. So kudos to the people that are out there doing it. I've had a conversation with another entrepreneur recently that they're a big hemp company, and they get frustrated because, even the really big hemp companies, like they have enough money, or it's like CBD cosmetic companies, they have enough money to have people just sitting there figuring out how to work the system. But yeah, for the little guys, man, you and I trying to promote our events here in New York, or a local product or something like that, it's not worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears to the coaching portion and ask you, what's your biggest business buzzkill right now?
Biggest business buzzkill. I think the biggest challenge I have is that this is going to sound a little weird, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity out there. And honestly, you can talk about new opportunities every single day with people, and they might be real opportunities. But if you spend 4 hours a day talking about opportunities, 4 hours a day doing real work, it's very difficult to ever pursue those real opportunities. So I have a handful of really, real investment opportunities, real monetization opportunities with the platform. And I think I struggle with, like, oh, okay, should I chase the big picture and go after these investors because it's something that I know how to do? Or should I focus on the thing that's going to generate the revenue right now, that's going to get the investors interested down the line? And so, just a matter of building the ship while flying it, and really taking the time to focus on opportunities one at a time, and really prioritize them. I think is probably prioritization, if you boil it down into one word.
Gotcha. So the good news for me is that I talk about this in the book, that, this is the paradox in cannabis. There's no shortage of opportunities. In fact, there's so many opportunities that the problem is just focusing and sticking to one long enough to see it through. So I think that that's a challenge that pretty much everyone in the space faces at some point. And the bad news for you is that I'm going to offer you, after we get off the podcast, I'm going to offer you an opportunity that came to mind that I think is actually pretty compelling. But, now I feel a little guilty. I'm going to add to your plate of potential distractions. But,
All right, I love it. That's also the problem.
Right. Trust me,
I love the distraction.
I'm totally in the same boat with you there, where I'm like, there's so much cool stuff that I could be doing, and I want to learn about it. I want to hear about it. So this is totally my problem too. And so the question I'm going to ask you is, how do you prioritize right now? What is your process for prioritizing?
It's very, it's interesting. So my advertising world, this was a problem too. I worked at a couple of very hot agencies that got a lot of inbound, right? And I actually, I created a methodology. It was revenue, resources, reputation, and reward. Does it represent the right amount of revenue? Do I have the resources to do it? Does the brand have a good reputation? Do they pay net 60 or do they pay net 15? That's a big deal if you're a company, your cash flow, stuff like that. Are they jerks or are they not? Are they known to fire their agencies within a year or are they not? And then reward is like, okay, even if the revenue isn't up here, are we going to create award-winning work down here? And sometimes for your creative team in an agency, you have to go to, pick up ESPN as a client. They're not going to pay you the same as some of your other clients, but you're going to do an ESPN commercial, right? And you're going to put that on your reel. You're going to retain your talents in your team. So that's how I did it. Then I don't think I've actually come to as good of a process in my personal life, because it's just me, and I had to do that to wrangle in like 12 executives at an agency, to give them a framework. But I've been spending chasing money in the last 2 years. Anything that helps brings more people, creates more connection, is really my top priority, because that is the thing that feeds everything. That is the flywheel or the heartbeat of what I'm trying to build. And then from there, it really comes down to investing time in things that are going to, have financial upside to the platform. So anything that's community driven, entertains the community, keeps them engaged, builds those engagement, and I wouldn't say following numbers, but you get what I'm saying, kind of the soft metrics that tell me that my community health is good. That's kind of numero uno. And then my second priority is really focusing on cashing in on some of the more immediate financial opportunities. Like, if somebody, and I'll give you a range of what those are. Somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, I need an accountant. I haven't, my account doesn't want to deal with cannabis anymore. I can just refer somebody to an accountant, and I have a couple of people that I work with that, I just trust and I can hand people over to. On the other hand, some people might want some, and I can get commissions off that. I'm very transparent about like who I'm doing certain deals with and whatnot. And then sometimes I do brand stuff. Like if it's something that's really in my wheelhouse as a marketer, and I can do a retainer project, and it's, a few hours a week, I'll prioritize that, because it allows me to work more in the cannabis environment, which I learn something every time I do it. And yeah, it's, we all got to eat. So you got to make a little bit of money to, I really did spend about a year and a half, 2 years, leveraging the funding I was able to get and just pushing it as hard as I could. And it's not like I got like an uber amount of funding. It's just, priority was growing the community, getting feedback on the platform, building software that actually reflects how people interact in real life. Like, that's really hard. Like, people take for granted how good Facebook and Instagram are and how well they work. It's not without billions of dollars of engineering and testing and, buying server farms that speed up their app versus everybody else's, So, but yeah, community than money, I guess, is the best way to put it.
I like that. And I want to repeat that framework, because for the folks who might be watching or listening, use this. This is a great framework. The revenue, resources, reputation, reward. It's a great framework to assess, is this worth my time? And ultimately, every business decision you're going to make is going to come down to time and money. Mm-hmm. Is it worth the time and money? And I think that, it's really interesting what you said about any project you do in cannabis, you learn something. I think that's incredibly important to recognize, that getting experience, building that cannabis resume, so to speak, is important, especially if you're approaching the industry in which is, in my judgment, the correct way to do it, with a long-term view. Because, the more of that stuff you add to your resume, the more you enhance your reputation, the more you build trust, the more you'll get referrals, the more opportunities will find you. So, I'm hearing that you maybe haven't applied that framework as much to cannabis stuff as you may have, or you may. But it seems like you actually know what the priorities are. And, one other thing I'll offer, just based on my past experience, when once upon a time I used to sell software to agencies and marketers, you have the benefit of coming from that world of being extremely metric and data driven and oriented. So, when you say community is the goal or money is the goal, or priority rather, I think it's critically important, again, for people who might be listening at home, that you need to have metrics or KPIs around whatever your priorities are, because then when something comes across your plate, you can ask yourself, you can have some built-in, I don't know if accountability is the word, but some kind of like a built-in checkpoint to see, how is this opportunity going to improve or increase my KPI? And if you don't have that clear answer, then it's much easier to say no, which again, I can speak just from my personal experience. This is a big challenge of mine, saying no to stuff, saying no to hearing opportunities or learning more about potential projects, or even the entrepreneurs that are building these projects. Because, like you, for me, community is a priority, and connecting with people and knowing what's going on and who's working on what, it's an important piece of the puzzle for me, but it doesn't add revenue today, usually.
Right.
So
that's part of being in an early industry. And even the things that do add revenue, maybe you're doing it for less revenue than you're used to in a previous world. But like, part of that's because some of this stuff never existed before. I think the reward is always there. The reputation is always important. The resources are rarely there because it's often me, right? And yeah, the revenue. So if there's a little bit of revenue and they have a good reputation, those are the two R's that I need to get going right there, because they're both going to go towards that goal of building community and building that. I think I've internalized the 4 R's over time and just how I think through stuff. But it's definitely a framework worth using for, especially if you manage a lot of people trying to identify opportunities. That's where I find it's really helpful. For me, I kind of just do the calculation in my head and determine if something's worth pursuing, because I do stuff outside of cannabis as well. Like my general rule of thumb, if I'm working with a client right now that is a revenue opportunity, is it's either a local business, it's a social good opportunity where I'm doing, like I did, I helped American Express launch their reclaimed ocean plastic card last year, which is a big client. It's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of work to deal with a client that size, but I was doing something good. Or it's got to be in cannabis. Those are kind of my three criteria right now for any kind of consulting work I do, because I either got to feel good that I'm doing social good, or I'm helping a local business, or I'm diving into the thing that I want to be in, 100% of my time. So
nice. Awesome. Well, I'm gonna add a 5th R to your framework, if I may, which is risk. And I think it's critically important, especially in cannabis, especially when that reputation piece and that revenue piece are sometimes questionable.
right.
I think it's really important to think about, what is the risk on taking on a particular project or a particular client, and not just in terms of, well, what if I don't do a good job? What if it doesn't work out? What if I waste my time here? But specifically, I think understanding that, there's only so many hours in a day, and opportunity cost is, sometimes very sneaky, and sometimes, we don't realize, or I should say, sometimes I don't realize how much time I'm spending going down the rabbit hole that could have been spent elsewhere, generating revenue, building the reputation, building relationships. And so I think it's critically important when assessing any opportunity to think about, what's the risk here? What's the risk that I have to take? What do I have to give up to take this on? Or what may go wrong here and might actually backfire if things don't work out? So I'm going to offer that to the audience as well.
For sure, man. I think, anytime you're in a compliance ridden industry like this in particular, that becomes even more important, right?
Absolutely.
Because there is a lot of risk, you might invest, you're not building a processing facility for less than $5 million. So there's definitely money at risk. There's certainly, reputational stuff at risk for some people. If you don't hire the right people, they can put you at further risk. So it's definitely a much more considered career field to get into than working in an advertising agency, right?
That's right. Awesome. Justin, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the show. And I gotta, as soon as we get off here, I'm gonna have to get on the platform and seed my book and seed the podcast on there. And hopefully I can make it to one of the top picks. But in any case, I want to thank you. And before we disconnect, I would love to chat with you for just 5 minutes on this potential opportunity, potential distraction.
For sure, man. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is the Cannabis Business Coach. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is
the Cannabis Business Coach.